Sing? Chloe smirked. She'll barely make a sound. The room of white faces waited to laugh, but the moment Ava opened her mouth, they forgot to breathe. At 6 a.m., the alarm buzzed in the small apartment off Maple Street, but Ava Thompson was already awake. She lay quietly in the darkness, listening to her mother shuffle through the kitchen, packing lunches and folding uniforms between sips of reheated coffee. Ava was 13, one of only 10 black students at Bellwood Academy, and definitely the poorest. Bellwood was where politicians sent their kids, where marble floors gleamed and every student's name came engraved on brass plaques, except hers. Every morning before school, Ava stood in the bathroom with the lights off and sang. Just her, the mirror, and the ghost of her grandmother, Gloria Thompson, who once told her, "Your voice is the part of you no one can touch, unless you let them." Gloria had been a jazz singer in the 60s, the real kind, gravel and gold in her voice, nights at Blue Note and smoke-filled clubs. She died just 3 months earlier, and ever since Ava's bathroom became a stage no one could see. But today, the stage would be real. Bellwood's hallways smelled like money and authority. Ava kept her head down, her uniform spotless. She passed lockers that cost more than her rent and girls who called her diversity. She'd gotten used to the whispers, but she wasn't ready for this. At lunch, Chloe Whitmore, the platinum-haired daughter of a state senator, made her move. "Ava," she said sweetly, sliding into the seat across from her, "I heard Ms. Pennington wants more cultural diversity in the winter showcase. I thought of you." Harper, Ava's only real friend, stiffened beside her. "She doesn't perform," Harper said. "She's not interested." But Chloe's smile only widened. "Oh, come on. Just one song. Something soulful. It'd be so authentic." Ava froze. It felt like a trap. But Chloe had already walked away, leaving a trail of perfume and fake sincerity. That night, Ava told her mom nothing. Monica Thompson had come home after 14 hours split between the hospital and the law firm. Her hands were swollen, her eyes glassy. Ava just kissed her forehead and went to bed. She sang in the dark, but her voice shook. The next morning, Harper found her in the courtyard. "Your name's on the sign-up sheet," she said, breathless. "Solo act, vocal, African-American spiritual." Ava blinked. "What?" "It's not your handwriting, but it's on there." The signature was a perfect forgery. She stormed to Ms. Pennington's office. The teacher didn't even look up. "Deadline passed. Signature's here. You're performing." "But if you back out now, it won't reflect well on your character, Ava," she added coldly. "We expect follow-through at Bellwood." And just like that, it was done. Ava walked out of the room, heart pounding. Someone had set her up, and they were going to watch her fall. But Ava Thompson had her grandmother's voice, and the world was about to hear it. Ava didn't say a word the next morning. She moved through the kitchen like a shadow, silent, precise, keeping her eyes down as she toasted a slice of bread and packed her lunch with the same care one might give a fragile glass ornament. Monica, her mother, glanced up from her coffee with concern but didn't press. Years of hard shifts and harder conversations had taught them both that silence was sometimes a form of strength. Still, Monica's eyes lingered on her daughter longer than usual. She could feel it. The tension. The storm. Ava left for school without saying goodbye. Bellwood loomed like a palace of polished stone as she stepped through its wrought iron gates. But to her, it might as well have been a theater. Every hallway, every locker, a stage of whispers and second glances. She's actually doing it? What song do you think she'll sing? Probably something Cultural. She's going to embarrass herself. The worst part wasn't the cruelty. It was the casualness of it. The way they tossed out stereotypes with the same ease they ordered oat milk lattes. They didn't even think they were being cruel. That made it worse. Ava moved through the day like a ghost. At lunch, she sat beside Harper near the back exit of the cafeteria, barely touching her sandwich. "You don't have to go through with it," Harper whispered. "You can refuse." "I already tried," Ava said flatly. "Ms. Pennington made it clear. Backing out would reflect poorly on my character." Harper rolled her eyes. This school wouldn't recognize character if it walked in wearing Gucci and a trust fund. Ava managed a weak smile, but her hands trembled slightly as she held her water bottle. It wasn't just fear. It was something else. A slow burn of something deeper, older, something that tasted a lot like injustice. That afternoon, Ava didn't go home right away. Instead, she rode 2 buses across town to her grandmother's old apartment, the one Monica hadn't sold yet. The place stood quiet and dusty now, untouched since Gloria's funeral. Ava let herself in with the key Monica still kept on her ring. She walked straight to the back room, where the old record shelf stood against the wall. The air smelled like lavender and vinyl. The light filtering through the curtains painted everything in soft gold. The record collection hadn't moved. Neither had the turntable. Ava knelt down and ran her fingers along the spines. Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, Etta James. And then, in a plain brown sleeve with Gloria's handwriting scrawled in gold ink, "Live at the Blue Note, July 1967. She pulled it out and placed it gently on the turntable. The needle landed with a soft crackle. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the voice, smooth and sandpaper, velvet and thunder. It rose slowly, like smoke, filling the room with a sound that didn't just exist. It declared. Ava closed her eyes. She could see it. Her grandmother on stage, head thrown back, eyes half closed, the brooch pinned to her collar glinting under stage lights, singing not for applause, but for something far more sacred. And in that moment, Ava remembered. It had been a rainy Saturday afternoon, just a year before Gloria passed. Ava had been helping clean records when she found a notebook tucked between sleeves. Lyrics written in her grandmother's looping cursive. Notes. Breathing patterns. And at the top of one page, a single line underlined 3 times. "They will try to tell you what to sing. Sing louder." Ava had asked, "Grandma, were you ever scared?" Gloria had chuckled. "Scared? Baby, I was terrified. Every time I stepped on that stage, there was someone hoping I'd fail. But you know what I learned?" Ava had shaken her head. Gloria leaned in close, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "They fear what they can't control. And a black woman with a voice they can't predict? That's power, baby. That's a storm." Ava remembered how those words had stuck to her ribs like soul food. And yet she had kept her voice hidden, out of fear, out of self-preservation, out of knowing exactly what they would do if she dared to shine. But now they dragged her onto the stage anyway. The difference was, this time, she would choose what she sang. Back at Bellwood, Ms. Pennington handed her a manila folder after class. "We've chosen something more appropriate for the showcase," the teacher said, her lips pinched. Ava opened the folder. Ave Maria. The print was sharp and professional, a notoriously difficult soprano piece, written in Latin, requiring years of vocal training. "This isn't a spiritual," Ava said, stunned. "No, but we thought it would be best for Westlake's presentation." Ms. Pennington replied smoothly. You'll rehearse with the accompanist starting next week. Ava stared at the notes, at the impossible runs, at the trap dressed as opportunity. They were going to drown her. That night, back in her room, Ava lit a candle and played Gloria's record again. She sat on the edge of her bed, the manila folder open beside her. One hand rested on her chest, feeling her heartbeat. The other gripped a pen. She turned the sheet over and began writing, not Ave Maria, not their vision of what a black girl should sound like, not the stereotype, her own. The next few days passed in quiet defiance. Ava rehearsed, not at school, but at home, in the bathroom, in her grandmother's apartment, sometimes at Harmony Books down the street when the owner let her use the back room. She practiced spirituals with jazz inflections, blues bends, gospel phrasing. She recorded herself. She rewrote verses. She mixed in harmonies she remembered from her grandma's voice. She began crafting a piece called Unsilenced. It wasn't just a song. It was a statement. She was terrified. But more than that, she was ready. Back at Bellwood, Chloe Whitmore grew bolder. Her friends snickered behind their hands in the hallway. Harper once found a printed flyer in the girls' bathroom with a cartoon of Ava holding a microphone, next to the words, "Coming soon, Beyoncé Jr." Ava stared at it for a long moment. Then she folded it once, twice, tore it in half, and kept walking. She returned to her grandmother's apartment that evening, lit a candle, pulled out the one photo she had of Gloria on stage, microphone in one hand, brooch at her throat, eyes on fire. Ava pinned that photo to her mirror. You got through worse, she whispered. Now it's my turn. The announcement board outside Bellwood's Performing Arts Center drew its usual crowd on Thursday morning. Most of the students were there for showmanship, not sincerity, buzzing about who had been chosen for the winter showcase and who had been mysteriously left off. For some, this event was a launchpad to Juilliard or Columbia. For others, it was just another spotlight to add to their legacy folders. For Ava Thompson, it was a wall she hadn't planned to approach. But fate pulled her there anyway. She hadn't even reached her locker when Harper came running, her bag swinging, eyes wide with panic. "Ava!" she hissed, grabbing her sleeve. "You're on the list!" "What list?" Ava asked, still groggy from staying up half the night rewriting lyrics. Harper didn't answer. She dragged her down the hallway, through a crowd of rehearsing violinists and show choir hopefuls until they reached the glass case near the auditorium. There it was. Thompson, Ava, vocal solo. African-American spiritual Ava's heart dropped into her stomach. "That's not mine," she whispered. Harper pointed to the signature box. A looping signature, neat, confident, hers, only not. Ava stared at the name. "That's not my handwriting," she said, voice thin. "You didn't sign it?" Harper asked. "I told you, I wasn't going to do this." They stood in silence as a few students passed by, glancing, smirking. "That's what she's singing?" "Of course. What else?" "Bet it's going to be like, 'This Little Light of Mine.'" The air around them tightened like a noose. Ava's chest burned. She turned on her heel and stormed toward the music wing. Ms. Pennington was in her classroom, arranging sheet music into tidy stacks like she was filing evidence in a trial. She barely looked up when Ava entered. "I didn't sign up," Ava said sharply. "Oh?" Ms. Pennington replied without pause. "My name's on the list, but I didn't sign that form. Someone else did." The music teacher finally raised her head. "The submission includes your signature." "It's forged." Ms. Pennington gave a tight smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "That's a serious accusation, Ava. Are you suggesting another student committed academic fraud?" I'm telling you someone did. That's not my signature. I've seen your writing on assignments. It's remarkably similar. Ava's mouth opened, then closed. You're welcome to withdraw, Ms. Pennington added. But I must remind you, backing out after names are announced reflects poorly on student commitment, especially for scholarship students. There it was. That word again. Scholarship. A label that followed her everywhere like a price tag. It didn't matter how hard she worked or what grade she got. To them, she wasn't Ava Thompson. She was the financial aid girl who should be grateful. Ms. Pennington turned back to her music. If you're reconsidering because of nerves, I suggest practice. Bellwood expects its performers to rise to the occasion. Ava's nails dug into her palms. What am I supposed to sing? Ms. Pennington didn't even glance at her as she replied, An African-American spiritual of your choice. I assumed you'd be familiar with the genre. And just like that, the conversation was over. She walked the halls in a fog the rest of the day, her name a burning brand on her back. She heard it everywhere. Her name, her performance, her fake confidence. At lunch, she barely sat down when Chloe Whitmore strolled over, arms folded like a model in a photo shoot. Oh my God, Ava, Chloe said, all syrup and snake venom. I saw your name on the list. That's so brave of you. Ava didn't respond. I mean, I told Ms. Pennington we needed more representation this year. Not just all Bach and Broadway, you know? She leaned in. You should totally embrace something authentic. You've got that kind of voice. Harper stood abruptly. You mean the voice you've never heard? Chloe tilted her head, mock innocent. Well, not yet. But everyone says you have one. And this could be really good for the school's image. Don't you want to help? Ava stared at her. And for a moment, she saw it all. How carefully it had been orchestrated. The setup, the smile, the cultural checkbox. They had used her name like a tool, and now they wanted to use her voice like a prop. That night, Ava couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She sat in the corner of her room, knees hugged to her chest, staring at the manila folder with Ave Maria written across the top in bold print. She hadn't even looked at the sheet music since Ms. Pennington gave it to her. She finally opened it. Notes climbed and curled across the page like barbed wire. Sharp, cold, foreign. A performance meant for someone trained for years, not for a girl who sang in the bathroom between math homework and part-time jobs. She closed the folder and set it aside, then pulled her notebook from the drawer. Not the school-issued one. Her real notebook, the one where she scribbled thoughts and dreams and half-finished lyrics. She flipped to a clean page. At the top she wrote, They took my name, but they don't own my voice. The next day, Harper found her in the library during free period. You okay? Ava didn't look up. I've decided, she said quietly. I'm not singing their song. I'm not standing up there to prove something to them. Harper sat down. So you're backing out? Ava shook her head. No. I'm rewriting the rules. That afternoon, as she passed through the music wing, Ava heard faint music coming from the empty auditorium. She peeked through the crack in the door. Someone was sweeping the stage. Mr. Langston, the janitor. But there was something strange. He was humming. Not just humming, really. Vocalizing. In long, effortless tones that floated up to the rafters. His broom paused mid-sweep as he held a note Ava recognized. It was from her grandmother's favorite hymn. He finished, then chuckled to himself, and resumed sweeping. Ava stepped inside. I didn't know you sang, she said softly. Mr. Langston looked up, only slightly startled. Didn't know anyone was listening, he replied. Ava walked to the front row and sat. You hit that F sharp like it was nothing. He smiled. Once upon a time, it was nothing. You sound trained. He chuckled. 15 years at Juilliard. Taught vocal technique. Before, well, life changed directions. She stared at him. Why are you sweeping floors here? He leaned against his broom like it was a mic stand. Because sometimes, when you challenge the rules of a place that doesn't want to change, they make sure you never teach again. Ava's throat tightened. You're Gloria Thompson's granddaughter, aren't you? Her eyes widened. You knew her? Knew her? I performed with her at the Blue Note in '67. She was a lioness with a microphone. Taught me more than any conservatory ever could. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Ava said, almost a whisper, They forged my name. And now they want me to sing their version of me. Mr. Langston walked down the stage stairs and sat beside her. What are you going to do? I don't know, she whispered. Part of me wants to quit. Part of me wants to set the stage on fire. He laughed, deep and kind. Then don't do either. He leaned forward. Sing the song they assigned, but rewrite the way it's heard. You don't hide your light because it's small. You hide it because they taught you to fear how bright it could get. The next afternoon, Ava didn't go home after last period. She walked slowly through the near-empty halls of Bellwood, the echo of footsteps on polished marble bouncing back at her like whispers from the past. She didn't carry books. She carried purpose. Her feet led her not to the library, not to the music wing, not even to the auditorium, but to a door at the very end of the maintenance hallway. A door most students never noticed. The janitor's closet. She knocked once and waited. The door opened halfway. Mr. Langston stood in his brown uniform, a towel slung over one shoulder and an old transistor radio softly playing jazz on the shelf behind him. His eyes crinkled when he saw her. You found me, he said. I need your help, Ava replied. He stepped aside. Then come in. The room was barely wider than a walk-in pantry. Shelves of paper towels, brooms, and soap jugs lined the walls. A mop bucket stood half full in one corner. But near the back, past the supplies, Mr. Langston had created something else, something sacred, a makeshift music space. There was a folding chair, a dusty keyboard, and a metronome with a cracked face. Stacks of old sheet music were tucked into folders marked Langston, 1980s. The room smelled of lemon cleaner and memory. You practice here? Ava asked, her voice hushed. Not often, he replied, walking to the keyboard. But sometimes, when the halls are quiet and the world feels too loud, I come in here and remind myself who I was. He gestured to the folding chair. Sit. Ava sat. Mr. Langston sat across from her. You brought the music? He asked. She opened her backpack and pulled out a notebook. Inside, pages of scribbled lyrics, staff lines filled in by hand, riffs she remembered from her grandmother's recordings, modulations no one had taught her to write, but that lived inside her like breath. He flipped through the pages slowly, humming now and then, nodding, smiling. This is your song? He asked. It's called Unsilenced, Ava said. I built it around Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, but the second half is mine. It's a kind of answer. Mr. Langston set the notebook on the floor beside him. He looked at her, not like a student, but like a musician. Let's hear it. Her voice came quiet at first, the kind of quiet that trembles, not from weakness, but from something that's been hidden too long. She sang the first verse of the spiritual as written, her voice breathy but clear. Then she shifted, bent the melody, let it slide and swell with warmth. She dropped into a minor key, lifted into a jazz, phrasing her grandmother used to do with a snap of her fingers and a tilt of her chin. Mr. Langston's brow lifted. She sang the second verse with more strength, more freedom, like she wasn't singing for school, or judgment, or a stage, but for a memory, a promise, a woman named Gloria, and a girl who had nearly let them steal her name. By the time she finished the bridge she had written, the words, "They dimmed the light but not the flame," Mr. Langston sat motionless, his hands folded like prayer. When the final note faded, he exhaled slowly. He didn't speak for several seconds. Then, softly, "They're not ready for that." Ava's heart sank. He saw her face and smiled. "I didn't say don't do it," he added. "I said they're not ready, which means it's exactly what they need to hear." For the next week, they met after school, always in the closet, always after the halls emptied. Mr. Langston didn't try to change the song. He sharpened it. He taught her how to control her breathing, how to aim a note like an arrow, how to sing not to please, but to tell. Every vowel mattered, every silence between syllables. "She doesn't want you to fall apart," he said once, gesturing to her grandmother's old photograph, now pinned above the keyboard. "She wants you to stand taller than they ever thought you could." Ava practiced every day. At school, she stayed silent. She let Chloe assume she'd accepted defeat, let Ms. Pennington believe she was preparing Ave Maria, and let the showcase committee schedule her for last, so her song could be dismissed or forgotten. But what they didn't know was that she wasn't just preparing to sing. She was preparing to speak. On Friday, Ms. Pennington cornered Ava after class. "I hope you're ready," she said, her tone clipped. "Your slot is confirmed for 9:30 p.m. That's after most of the important guests have left, but we'll do our best to accommodate." Ava nodded. "Thank you." Ms. Pennington raised an eyebrow. "You've been awfully quiet during rehearsals. The accompanist says you haven't come once." "I'll be fine," Ava said simply. "You're still singing Ave Maria, yes?" There was a beat. Then Ava smiled, just barely. "I'll be singing something that represents who I am." Ms. Pennington's expression froze, but Ava was already walking away. That night, Ava stayed late at school. Her mother thought she was at the library. Instead, she was in the janitor's closet, standing in front of the cracked mirror, wearing the dress she had chosen for the showcase, simple black, modest neckline, and Gloria's amber brooch at the collar. She turned to Mr. Langston. "Do I look like I belong?" He didn't answer. He stepped forward and adjusted the brooch slightly, then said, "You look like someone who knows she never needed to ask." Outside, the sun set over Bellwood's stone courtyard, bathing the campus in gold and crimson. Inside a supply closet, a girl once silenced rehearsed the song that would split open the walls. "The moment they see you rising, they'll scramble to chain your wings." By Monday morning, the air at Bellwood felt sharper, the kind of sharp that sliced without blood. Students buzzed about the showcase, but Ava Thompson had become more than a name on a list. She had become a question, the kind people whispered between bites of avocado toast in the courtyard. "Is she really singing?" "I heard she's still doing Ave Maria." "No way. She's not even classically trained." "She probably doesn't even know Latin." "She's going to ruin the finale." Every hallway carried her name like an echo with a smirk behind it. But Ava walked like she didn't hear any of it, because she'd been rehearsing in silence so long the noise no longer mattered. Third period, English class. Mr. Dorsey announced they'd be analyzing protest songs that week. He turned to Ava. "Miss Thompson, maybe you can help us understand the urban perspective when we reach the hip-hop selections." It was said with a smile, the kind adults used when they thought they were being inclusive. Harper dropped her pencil loudly. "Maybe ask her about jazz spirituals," she muttered. Mr. Dorsey blinked. "Jazz? In protest?" Ava said nothing. Sometimes silence was the sharpest protest of all. At lunch, the whispers continued. But this time, someone new approached her table. A senior boy named Theo, one of the few other black students at Bellwood. He rarely spoke, mostly stayed around the robotics lab. He sat beside her wordlessly, offering a small nod. "You good?" he asked after a long pause. Ava looked up. "Working on it." He reached into his bag and slid her something under the table. It was a program from a showcase 10 years ago. The front cover read, "Bellwood Winter Showcase 2013. On the back page, under Notable Performers, someone had circled a name in red ink, Langston Micah, Director of Vocal Instruction, Juilliard, retired. Ava stared at it. "Mr. Langston used to be a judge?" Theo nodded. "And a guest artist, until a board member accused him of influencing the wrong kind of students." The words tightened Ava's chest. She looked at the cover again, then tucked the program carefully into her backpack. It wasn't just her story unfolding. It never had been. She returned to the music wing between classes. Ms. Pennington was in her office, marking sheet music. Ava knocked, entered. "May I speak with you?" The teacher barely looked up. "Of course. I'd like to confirm my final showcase piece." Ms. Pennington's pen paused. "I assumed you were preparing Ave Maria," she said, tone cool. Ava shook her head. "I never agreed to it. I planned to perform a vocal arrangement rooted in African American spirituals." Ms. Pennington's smile didn't move. "I see." She reached into her desk, pulled out a form. "This is a signed approval for Ave Maria," she said. "We submitted it to the showcase committee last week. Your accompanist is already scheduled." Ava stepped forward. "That's not my signature." Ms. Pennington handed her the form. The signature was close. Too close. Exactly like the one on the original sign-up sheet. Another forgery. "You forged this?" Ava whispered. Ms. Pennington blinked, faux offense dripping from her brow. "Ava, that's a serious accusation." "My name's been signed twice now." "I think perhaps you're overwhelmed," Ms. Pennington said calmly. "This is a rigorous academic environment. The piece I selected is within the classical canon and reflects Bellwood's commitment to excellence. The spirituals you're referring to are lovely, but lack the technical requirements our judges seek." There it was, the erasure, disguised as refinement. "Besides," Ms. Pennington added, "Ave Maria will be much easier to grade." Ava blinked. "Grade?" "All performances are evaluated. You're still in school, Ava." Something in Ava's stomach turned. "Is it about the grade?" she asked, voice low. "Or is it about what you don't want the board to hear?" Ms. Pennington stood. Her smile vanished. "You will sing the piece assigned to you," she said flatly. "If you deviate, there will be consequences. Do you understand?" Ava's hands clenched, but she didn't argue. She just nodded, then walked out. Because she had learned from her grandmother, Some songs are best saved for the stage. That evening, Ava met Mr. Langston in the back of Harmony Books. He saw her face before she said a word. "What did they do?" he asked. She pulled the forged signature from her bag. He read it, then crumpled it silently and set it on the table. "They're afraid," he said. "They changed my song," she whispered, "and threatened consequences." "Which means," Mr. Langston replied, "you're getting close." She told him everything. About the Latin aria, the threats, the silent knives in teachers' voices, the judges chosen by influence, not merit, the real program erased from history. Mr. Langston listened without interrupting. Then he said, "We changed the plan." "What do you mean?" "You give them just enough Ave Maria to relax. Then, cut it off. Shift into your truth." Ava blinked. "They'll shut me down." "Not if you move fast. Not if you prepare the sound team. Not if we have allies in the audience." She hesitated. "But I'd be disobeying direct orders." "No," he said. "You'd be reclaiming a stolen voice." He handed her a new arrangement. Ave Maria, with a transition. A perfectly structured modulation that bled into unsilenced. A trap within a trap. "You think I can pull that off?" Mr. Langston smiled. "Child, you already have." The next morning, Ava woke up early. She made breakfast for her mother for the first time in weeks. "Big day?" Monica asked gently. Ava nodded. "The biggest." She kissed her mother's cheek before leaving. It felt like armor. At school, the showcase setup was already in full swing. Lights were tested. Red velvet programs were stacked on tables. Parents with last names like Whitmore and Carrington and Riddleton arrived early for the exclusive donor reception. At 4:00 p.m., Ava walked backstage with her garment bag. Ms. Pennington greeted her with a nod. "You're at microphone 3. Sound check at 5:00. Ava nodded. Inside her bag was the black dress she'd chosen. Inside her notebook was the rewritten arrangement. Inside her heart was a storm, finally ready to break. Harmony Books didn't look like much from the outside. Just a faded awning, a chalkboard sign with a Maya Angelou quote half erased by wind, and a display window that featured more flyers than books. But for Ava Thompson, it felt like walking into a heart that still beat for her. The bell over the door jingled as she stepped inside, the scent of old paper and new hope wrapping around her like a scarf. She wasn't alone. The back room was already full. Some she knew. Harper, of course, sitting cross-legged with a notepad and a fierce gleam in her eyes. Mr. Langston, arms folded, standing beside a dusty bookshelf like a sentry. Others were new. A woman with gray braids and large hoop earrings who smiled the moment Ava entered. A tall man in a faded denim jacket with music notes tattooed up one arm. Two white women in their 60s sitting together, one holding a thick binder on her lap. And at the center of it all stood Naomi Blake, former Bellwood student, now a Grammy-nominated producer, and, as of this year, a judge for the Winter Showcase. Naomi extended her hand. "You must be Ava." Ava shook it, hesitantly. "How do you all know each other?" Naomi smiled. "Because this has happened before." They called themselves The Circle, not officially. No bylaws, no email list. Just a quiet collection of people who had once walked the same polished halls Ava now walked, some decades ago, some just last year, and who had seen the same patterns Ava was now caught inside. Ava sat, notebook in hand, as stories unfurled around her like the turning pages of a banned history book. a black violinist from the class of '93 who was asked to switch to cello because the audience finds it more dignified. A Filipina soprano who had been told to wear her hair straighter for the showcase in 2007. A boy who choreographed a spoken-word dance tribute to Langston Hughes, only to be told it lacked academic value. All of them had carried the burden of being the exception, of being allowed in the room as long as they never moved the furniture. Tradition, Naomi said, was their way of erasing the memory of who built the stage. Ava listened, stunned. "But why didn't anyone say anything?" she finally asked. "We did," said Ms. Darnell, the gray-braided woman who had once sung with Gloria Thompson in Chicago. "But we said it in harmony and metaphor and story." Mr. Langston added, "Some of us got fired for speaking louder." Naomi nodded. "But now the world's changed. Cameras are everywhere, phones, social media. If you tell the truth now, people might actually hear you." She turned to Ava. "What you sing next week matters." Ava swallowed. "What if they shut me down before I finish?" "They might," said Naomi. "That's why you're not singing alone." Over the next hour, the circle built a plan. Naomi had already used her connections to alert several national arts journalists that something remarkable might happen at Bellwood's winter showcase. The press credentials were approved before the administration could block them. Mr. Langston had secured a private rehearsal space 2 blocks away, with real equipment, real acoustics, and no risk of interruption. Ms. Darnell offered backup vocals. "I may be 68, baby," she laughed, "but I can still harmonize like Sunday morning." The retired violinist, now a civil rights attorney, brought out a legal folder. "We've documented a pattern of showcase manipulation and academic retaliation. If they cut your mic or try to penalize you, we'll file." Even Harper contributed, offering to create a social media campaign. "We launch it the morning after the showcase. The story's already written. We just need the headline." Ava sat in the middle of it all, overwhelmed. "You all came for me?" Naomi reached over, gently touching her hand. "No, we came for us. But you're the one brave enough to stand in front." When the meeting ended, Ava lingered in the front room of the bookstore. The owner, an elderly man named Ezra, showed her a wall near the poetry section. Framed photos hung there, some faded, some glossy. Black and white portraits, group photos, stages, faces. And in the center of it all, one photo took Ava's breath away. Her grandmother, Gloria Thompson, on stage at the original winter showcase. Before Bellwood had claimed it. Before it had been rebranded as an exclusive classical affair. Back when it was held in a church basement and funded by local artists. The caption beneath the photo read, "The First Voices, 1967. Ezra spoke softly. This was our showcase before it was theirs. Ava stared at her grandmother's face, eyes closed mid-note, brooch catching the light. And for the first time in days, she cried. Not from fear, but from connection. From knowing she was part of something much bigger than herself. She returned home after dark, her voice hoarse from rehearsal, her notebook full of revisions. Her mother sat at the kitchen table, bills spread out in front of her. "You've been quiet lately," Monica said. Ava poured herself a glass of water. "Just focused." "Focused on what?" Ava sat down, notebook in hand. She opened to the page that read Unsilenced, then flipped to the back, where a folded sheet of music was taped. "Mom," she said softly, "do you remember Grandma's song? The one she never recorded?" Monica looked up, startled. "You found that?" "I'm performing it." Silence. Then slowly Monica nodded. She would have been proud. Ava smiled. I'm going to make sure everyone hears it. The next day, Ava rehearsed in the borrowed space Naomi had arranged. It wasn't glamorous. Egg cartons on the walls for soundproofing, a second-hand microphone with duct tape at the base, but it was safe. And in safety, Ava found strength. They rehearsed the full set. Began with the expected, the Latin phrasing of Ave Maria, for 45 seconds. Then came the cut, the break, the truth. Her transition into unsilenced landed like a lightning strike. Harmonies swelled behind her. The piano dropped into gospel phrasing. Ms. Darnell's voice braided with hers. Mr. Langston called out cues. Naomi recorded every take, coaching her between runs like a mentor who had waited years for this exact moment. Don't perform for them, she said once. Perform through them. On Friday, Ava returned to Bellwood. She walked through the halls that once made her shrink. But now, she didn't walk small. She walked like the girl whose voice could break a silence generations thick. A few students looked at her with curiosity, others with caution. Chloe passed her in the hallway and muttered, "Heard you're changing the program." Ava didn't reply. She just smiled. Because they had no idea what was coming. The stage lights dimmed as the final intermission ended. Red velvet curtains trembled slightly from the draft in the auditorium. The last notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 still echoed faintly through the walls as stagehands hurried to reset the microphones. Backstage, Ava stood alone in the narrow corridor behind the curtains. She could hear the hush of the remaining crowd, a mixture of polite guests, exhausted parents, indifferent judges, and, if all had gone to plan, a circle of allies waiting for a song they weren't supposed to hear. She clutched her grandmother's brooch at her throat. The amber stone shimmered faintly under the backstage lights. Ms. Pennington passed by, clipboard in hand. "You're up next," she said without emotion. "Please remember, stick to the program." Ava didn't reply. She simply adjusted the microphone to her height. A bell chimed. The house lights dimmed further. Principal Everett's voice rang out from center stage. "Our final performer this evening is Ava Thompson, performing Ave Maria, a classical soprano piece selected for its elegance and technical beauty." He gave the audience a gracious smile, then walked off. Stagehands motioned Ava forward. She stepped into the light. The spotlight struck her like heat. For a second, her knees almost gave out. But then she heard it. A throat clear from the left balcony. A soft, from the third row. Familiar sounds. Mr. Langston. Ms. Darnell. Naomi. Harper. Theo. Even some staff members she hadn't expected. She wasn't alone. Ava took her place at the center microphone. The piano accompanist, Bellwood's own Mr. Clement, sat poised to begin. She gave him a small nod. He launched into Ave Maria with professional grace. Ava began to sing, soft, controlled, every note correct, every breath timed. For the first 45 seconds, she sang what they wanted her to sing. She heard the polite interest from the audience, the way people shifted in their chairs, the rustle of programs, the sound of departure. A few audience members were already gathering their coats. Board members in the front row looked satisfied. Chloe Whitmore, sitting beside her father, smirked, because this was exactly what they had expected. Safe, small, obedient. Then Ava stopped. Mid-phrase. A silence fell. Confused murmurs rippled. The pianist looked up. Ava raised her hand gently to signal him. She stepped closer to the microphone. "I'd like to offer an alternate arrangement," she said. A flicker ran through the crowd. Heads turned. Ms. Pennington, backstage, froze in place. Principal Everett leaned forward in his seat. Ava took a long breath. Then she began again. But not Ave Maria. She sang the opening of Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. Slow, unaccompanied. Her voice floated into the rafters, strong and haunting. For a moment, even those reaching for the exit sat back down. By the second verse, she had shifted, modulated into a jazz-laced harmony, the melody bending with defiance. Ms. Darnell's voice rose in soft background support from offstage. The piano returned, not classical, but gospel. The energy changed. The audience sat upright. Even the judges, startled, leaned forward. Then came the original verse, the one Ava had written. She sang, "You named me guest. You wrote my line, but I rewrote it in my own time. I am not your footnote fame. I'm legacy, carved into flame." Whispers became silence. A camera phone lit up in the third row. Then another. Naomi Blake at the judges' table crossed her arms and nodded slowly. From the side wing, Chloe stood up, face red. Mr. Langston, seated near the back, stood. Quiet. Proud. The sound technician hesitated, then boosted Ava's microphone volume instead of cutting it. Ms. Pennington made her move. She walked briskly to the control booth. "Cut her mic," she whispered harshly. The technician, a sophomore who'd joined the circle 2 nights earlier, simply said, "Sorry, ma'am, system's locked." Ava's voice soared. She sang with every inch of her lungs, her story etched into each note. This wasn't performance anymore. This was protest, prayer, declaration. From a girl who had been erased, then rewrote herself in real time. Tears streamed down Monica Thompson's face as she stood in the side aisle, hand over her heart. Behind her, others stood too. Not just the allies from Harmony Books. Not just black families. Not just the teachers who'd once said nothing. Everyone who had ever felt silenced. They stood. And then they applauded. When the final note dropped into silence, it lingered. The audience didn't cheer immediately. They just held their breath, and then, like a wave, applause, shouts, foot stomps, tears. A standing ovation. Except the front row. Principal Everett stayed seated, arms crossed. Chloe's father whispered something sharp into his ear. But it no longer mattered. Ava had already sung through them. As she bowed, the spotlight caught the amber brooch. And in that glimmer, it wasn't just Ava on that stage. It was Gloria. It was every student who'd been erased. Every song that had been deemed too raw, too real, too black, too inconvenient. Ava had sung them all back into the room, and no one could silence her again. Backstage, Ms. Pennington waited, arms folded. "You violated the program," she said coldly. Ava looked at her. "I honored the one you erased." Ms. Pennington's jaw tightened. "You've jeopardized your grade, your scholarship." But Ava turned away and walked toward the door where her mother was waiting. Outside, a light rain had begun to fall, but Ava didn't notice, because when she stepped into the night, the crowd that followed wasn't just applauding. They were asking questions. "What was that song? Where can I hear it again? Why haven't we heard this before?" Naomi Blake stepped forward. "We'll make sure they do." By dawn, the video had reached 12,000 views. By noon, it was on NPR. By 5 p.m., #unsilenced at Bellwood was trending across the country. Harper had uploaded it first, straight from her phone, shaky but real. The caption read, "They said she could sing if she followed the rules. She rewrote the rules, and then the roof came off." Then came Naomi Blake's post. Professionally edited footage, audio from the board feed, overlays of Ava's lyrics transcribed line by line. She added, "History doesn't whisper, it sings. Remember her name." The comments were flooded. Who is this girl? Why does this feel like a turning point? I just cried at my desk watching this. Every school in America needs to see this performance. But not all the voices were supportive. Some comments called Ava disrespectful, a disruption, entitled. Others questioned her intentions, her talent, even her right to be on that stage. Ava read a few, then closed the app. Because she wasn't looking for validation. She had already heard it, in every note that echoed back to her the night before. At home, Ava lay on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, phone off, tea half sipped, mind racing. Monica sat nearby, knitting for the first time in weeks. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Their silence wasn't hollow. It was full of memory, of pride, of the long stretch of history that had finally snapped into focus. By evening, Principal Everett issued a formal statement. While we appreciate our students' passion and creative expression, Bellwood Academy remains committed to the values of structure, discipline, and shared tradition. The rest blurred into bureaucratic jargon. But Ava had already heard what mattered. They were uncomfortable. They were on defense. And most importantly, they were no longer in control of the narrative. The next morning, Ava arrived at school prepared for confrontation. But what she got was something different. Silence in the halls. Not the cold kind, but watchful. Eyes on her. Teachers who nodded subtly. Students who whispered when she passed but didn't laugh. Theo high-fived her in the cafeteria. A girl she'd never met before slipped a folded note into her locker. "My sister never got to sing her own song. Thank you for yours." Ms. Darnell texted her. "One voice becomes a choir." But then came the email. Academic probation. Not for grades, not for conduct, for deliberate deviation from approved performance curriculum. Ava stared at the screen. Her scholarship, her record, all of it now in jeopardy. The same school that had used her voice to raise money, raise prestige, now used policy to punish it. Naomi called instantly. Expected, but still disgusting. Ava felt the familiar tightness in her chest. "But what do I do?" "You show up," Naomi said. "You walk through their doors with your chin high. And if they try to pull your mic again, this time the entire country's watching." Harper had already drafted a response. Theo started printing flyers with QR codes linked to the performance. Mr. Langston reached out to the ACLU. And Harmony Books? They organized a listening circle, inviting alumni, activists, and local media to gather, reflect, and speak. But Ava, she hesitated. She didn't want a war. She wanted to sing. That night, she took the bus to the church where her grandmother once sang. Empty pews, dusty hymnals, a cross lit only by moonlight. She sat at the piano, pressed a key softly. A single note vibrated in the air. Then she sang, not for audience or protest or performance, but for herself. And in that quiet, she remembered, this wasn't about punishment. It was about presence. And presence, once reclaimed, was impossible to erase again. The next day, the school board met. Ava wasn't invited, but Naomi was, and Ms. Darnell, and 2 other alumni who now sat on Bellwood's Diversity Council, who had never been called before, but suddenly found their inboxes open. Inside that cold conference room, Principal Everett defended his action. She violated the structure of our showcase. If every student personalized their set, we'd have chaos. Naomi stood. If every student felt heard, you'd have harmony. The debate went long, but by 4:17 p.m., the decision came down. Probation lifted. Ava received the news at her locker. Theo told her first, ran up breathless, waving his phone. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just nodded and smiled. That night, the New York Times ran a piece titled, "When a High School Voice Echoes Through America." It ended with a quote from Naomi. "You can't erase a girl once she learns she's not the echo. She's the origin." Ava lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. No spotlights, no microphones, no audience. But in her heart, there was still music. And in the silence of her room, a quiet certainty. She hadn't just survived the showcase. She had changed it. Forever. Ava always thought she knew everything there was to know about her great-aunt Gloria. The framed photo that stood in their living room. Gloria on stage, eyes closed, mouth open in mid-note, long braids swinging behind her like banners. The same photo her mother touched each night after dinner. The old records, mostly scratched, of gospel choirs and protest songs, with Gloria's initials penciled onto the sleeves like signatures from another life. The stories, always spoken in tones of admiration, but with a silence wrapped around the edges. It wasn't that Gloria hadn't been loved, it was that Gloria hadn't been heard. Not all the way. 2 days after Ava's probation was lifted, Ms. Darnell stopped by the house with a plain envelope. Brown, soft-edged, the kind that had passed through too many hands. "I found this in the Harmony Books archives," she said. "It was never mailed. I think she wrote it for someone. Maybe herself. Maybe the world." She didn't say more. She didn't have to. Ava waited until nightfall to open it. She sat cross-legged on the bedroom floor, back against the bookshelf. The envelope smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. Inside, one sheet. Yellowed. Ink faded, but still legible. She unfolded it slowly and read. August 3rd, 1964. Dear whoever finds this, I was told I should be grateful. That being allowed to sing at the Founders' Jubilee was enough. That I should smile pretty, hold my pitch, and not make the audience uncomfortable. But the truth is, I swallowed a whole song that night. The one I wanted to sing, the one I wrote in my grandmother's kitchen, with flour on my hands and freedom in my throat. They said it didn't match the tone of the evening. They said it would confuse people. So I smiled, and I sang their song. And when I left the stage, I left a piece of myself behind, folded into the curtains. Maybe one day a girl like me will walk onto that same stage, and instead of folding herself up to fit their expectations, she'll unfold something bigger. Maybe her voice won't be a footnote. Maybe it'll be the headline. I hope I'm there to hear it. But if I'm not, sing it loud enough that heaven hears, too. In music, always, Gloria M. Thompson. Ava didn't move for a long time. Her fingers pressed into the bottom edge of the page, as if afraid it might fly away. A sob built in her chest. Not sadness, not quite. More like release. Because for the first time, she knew that her song hadn't been a beginning. It had been a continuation. A melody started in a small kitchen over half a century ago. A voice that had waited, line by line, note by note, for someone brave enough to finish it. Downstairs, Monica had already turned off the lights. But when Ava padded barefoot into the living room, she found her mother sitting quietly by the window, clutching her own mug. Ava handed her the letter without saying a word. Monica read it and wept. Not the quiet tears she usually tried to hide, but the kind that came from a place deeper than memory. From bone, from bloodline. She pulled Ava close and whispered, "She was waiting for you, baby. All this time." The next day, Ava brought the letter to school. She had printed a copy. She placed it inside the library's Black History showcase, right next to the photo of Gloria from the 1964 program. Some students walked past it, but others stopped. Read. Stared. One girl reached out and traced the line. Maybe her voice won't be a footnote. And whispered, "It won't." That afternoon, Ava visited Harmony Books. Naomi was waiting. "You read it?" she asked. Ava nodded. It was like a permission slip, but from the past. Naomi smiled. "You don't need permission anymore. You are the permission." Then she handed Ava a small box. Inside was a single golden lapel pin, a treble clef wrapped in a circle of laurel leaves. "Founders Circle wants you to be the keynote at next month's New Voices conference," she said. Ava blinked. "Me? You earned it. Not because you caused a stir, but because you reminded people why we sing in the first place." Ava held the pin in her palm. It was heavier than it looked, like legacy. That night, Ava sat at her desk and pulled out a fresh notebook. She wrote one sentence on the first page. "They tried to make her a whisper, but she became a verse that never ends." Then she turned to the second page and began writing lyrics. Not to prove anything, not to please anyone, just to write. Because she finally understood. Her voice wasn't just hers. It was Gloria's. It was Monica's. It was every girl who'd ever held her breath in a room that wanted her silent. And now, it was Ava's turn to breathe for all of them. Ava hadn't meant to cry before going on stage, but when she peeked through the curtain and saw the auditorium filling, students, professors, alumni, even strangers who'd only read the headline in the Tribune, something inside her shifted. This wasn't just another performance. This was something older, something bigger, something that began long before she was born. And maybe, if she did it right tonight, it wouldn't end with her either. The conference had titled the event New Voices Rising, but the irony wasn't lost on Ava. Her voice wasn't new. It was stitched together from generations, from Gloria's letter, from Monica's quiet resilience, from every time she'd wanted to speak up and didn't. Now, standing just off stage, she held that weight like a torch. Not a burden, not anymore. A legacy. When they called her name, Ava stepped into the spotlight. A single chair sat at center stage. On it, a photo of her great-aunt Gloria, young and radiant, mid-song. She stood beside it. No mic stand, no band, just her, and the silence waiting to be broken. She began not with a speech, but with a memory. "I used to believe," she said, "that having a voice meant being the loudest person in the room." Laughter rippled gently through the audience. "I believed that until I realized the people who shaped me most didn't always shout. They endured. They whispered. And sometimes they were silenced altogether." She looked down at Gloria's photo. "My great-aunt was told her music wasn't appropriate for the school stage, so she didn't sing it that day, but she wrote it down, and when I found her letter, it was like she was still waiting to be heard." Ava paused. "Tonight I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to finish her sentence." For the next 20 minutes, Ava didn't read from a script. She spoke with the calm fire of someone who had stopped needing permission. She told the story of that showcase and what it felt like to be reduced to a decoration. someone they wanted to clap for but not truly listen to. She talked about how the letter from Gloria changed everything, and how for the first time in her life, she'd realized the real stage wasn't made of wood or lights or applause. It was made of memory, of truth, of refusing to be erased. There were moments when the audience didn't move, when even breathing felt like an interruption, especially when Ava said, "We tell girls like me to dream big, but only if those dreams fit inside a frame someone else built." She let the silence after that line linger, then added, "Tonight, I brought my own frame." At the end of her speech, Ava reached into her bag and pulled out Gloria's original letter. She unfolded it slowly, then placed it on the empty chair beside the photo. "I don't need to read it to you again," she said, "because it's already alive. In every story we pass down, in every girl told to lower her voice who chooses not to, in every song that was never recorded but still hums in someone's heart." She looked out over the crowd. "You're not here for me. You're here because part of you has been waiting for your own voice to rise too." And then she stepped back. No bow, no curtain drop, just stillness, and applause that felt like thunder after a long storm. Backstage, Monica waited with open arms. Ava folded into her like a child and a grown woman all at once. "She heard you," Monica whispered. "I know she did." In the weeks that followed, things shifted back at Bellwood. Slowly, but undeniably. The school released a statement acknowledging its long-standing failures to uplift diverse voices in the arts. The music program introduced a new initiative called the Echo Project, inviting students to study, perform, and create original work inspired by voices once silenced. Ava was asked to teach a songwriting seminar over the summer. She agreed, but only if it was open to anyone. "No auditions," she told them. "Just honesty." On the first day of that seminar, Ava walked into a small room where 7 students sat in a nervous circle. Some of them had notebooks, others didn't. One boy brought nothing but a harmonica and a beaten-up backpack. "I'm not a real musician," he mumbled when she greeted him. She smiled gently. "You've got breath and story, right?" He nodded. "Then you've got everything." They wrote together, cried together, laughed over broken rhymes and off-key notes. And somewhere in the 3rd week, something magical happened. A shy girl named Layla stood up and sang a lullaby in Arabic she hadn't sung since her grandmother passed. No instruments, just voice. Everyone listened. And when she finished, Ava whispered, "That's what liberation sounds like." Harmony Books printed Gloria's letter on the inside flap of their spring poetry journal. They titled it, "The Verse That Waited." It sold out in 3 days. Ava donated her speaking fee to a local nonprofit providing instruments to underfunded schools in the South Side. She didn't want to be famous. She wanted to be useful. Years passed. Ava kept writing. Some songs were published, some weren't. She got married, had a daughter, named her Glory, not short for anything, just Glory, because that's what Ava believed every child deserved to carry into the world, the name of their own brightness. On the day Bellwood renamed their arts center, the Gloria M. Thompson Hall, Ava was invited to speak. She brought Glory with her, a precocious 6-year-old in pink overalls who kept asking if she could press the microphone button. Ava let her, and when it came time to say something, Glory stepped forward, looked straight into the sea of suited adults, and said, "My mommy sings stories." Everyone laughed, and Ava smiled, because it was true. She didn't just sing songs. She sang histories. She sang healing. She sang home. That night, back at home, Glory asked her to read a bedtime story. Instead, Ava sat on the edge of the bed and told her one. About a girl who found a letter from a woman who had once been told to stay quiet. "And what happened next?" Glory asked sleepily. Ava brushed her daughter's hair back from her forehead. "She sang," Ava whispered, "and someone heard her." Somewhere across time, in a place without clocks, a voice long silenced smiled and sang back.